Hello and welcome to this mission brief from Service to CEO, Why Veterans Make Great Franchise Owners. We are thrilled that you are here. My name is Brett Ethridge. You've seen my name in some of the emails. You guys know Bill Kieffer, most of you at least, I think. And so you're going to actually hear from him first, but just a quick introduction for myself. That's me in the picture kind of before I grew a little bit of a beard. With my dad and one of my sons, and the reason I like to show that picture is because it really, to me, speaks to the heart behind why I do what I do, right? So my brand, my brokerage is called Franchises for Fathers. And no, you don't have to be a father to be a franchise owner. But the heart behind what I do and why I do it is to really empower families to spend more time together. And I really believe in business ownership. I've been an entrepreneur really since I graduated from college. I had one traditional job right out of college, worked for a startup PR firm for a couple of years and loved it. It was a grind. It was fast paced. It was fun in Washington, D.C. before I went back to graduate school. But as a business owner, what I've realized is that I can be present with my kids. I can spend time with my own father. I can pick my kids up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon from school, go to all their games, go to the gym with my wife in the afternoon while still working and making a good life for ourselves. But I just really believe powerfully in entrepreneurship and business ownership as a vehicle to make that happen. And I believe very much that franchising can be a great fit for certain people and certain candidates. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. So you see a few of my credentials. Went to Duke undergrad, got my master's in international finance from the University of Denver, have built multiple businesses. I co-host a podcast called the Faithful Fatherhood Podcast, lots of hobbies, mostly athletically related. I'm a rower, a tennis player. My wife and I have a 5.5-acre farm here in East Tennessee where we grow a lot of our own food and chickens and things like that. So you'll hear more about me, but I'm going to kick it over to Bill to sort of set the stage. Bill, go ahead and take it away.
Well, thank you, Brett. Wow, it's great to see so many familiar names. I don't see everybody, but I can see the names in the list. So thanks, everybody, for joining this. For those of you that may be on that don't know me, I'm Bill Kieffer. I'm a career transition coach. I'm a former Army officer who, after the military, spent 22 years as an HR executive in Fortune 500s, focused on strategic talent management, essentially looking at business strategies through the lens of talent to figure out how many folks of what type, with what skills, and organized in what ways that allows us to go do what we said we're going to do. I'm a two-time entrepreneur, for-profit company, Kieffer and Associates, and my real passion work is my non-profit veteran career journey. Two-time author, you see the cheesy picture with me in the books on there, both focused at helping prepare service members and veterans for success before, during, and after their career transition. Married, father of 5, 8 grandkids. And when I'm not doing this work, I love getting out on my Harley. My mission specifically executed through Veteran Career Journey is to help bridge that veteran employer culture gap and to reduce veteran suicide. We do that by preparing service and members and veterans for success before, during, and after career transition, as I said, by providing what I like to call intelligence preparation of the career battlefield, practical, actionable insights from the employer side of the desk. We're trying to create a win-win for veterans and for employers. I know from firsthand experience how hard that transition can be, and I know as an employer the opportunities that we miss when we don't dive into the veteran talent pool. Target audience of Veteran Career Journey and all the work I do is all branches of service around the world. Most of our work does happen in the U.S., but I've had clients in Baghdad and Belgium and in the Far East. Since 2018, when I started dedicating my efforts to this work, I've coached and trained over 2,000 service members and veterans through career transition and facilitated over the donation of over 3,000 copies of my books. There are many paths to success when the uniform comes off, okay? On the bottom of the screen in the first image, you can see you can fully retire. Some folks do, but most don't. You can go on to education, with many folks do, and then most folks take the path to business of some sort. And when you go up that business path, there's really 3 ways you can go. One, many folks join existing companies. Some folks go to the right when become entrepreneurs, and about 8% of veterans um, are new business founders. I'm sorry, 8% of new business founders are veterans. Or you can go down the path we're going to talk about today, and that's franchising. And about 14% of franchisees today are veterans. Now, all those paths can lead to great success. It's really a matter of what you want to do. Franchising can be a great path because you get to leverage your leadership experience using established business models. You can learn from existing best practices and then creatively grow within a framework. You can buy in and pay your franchise fees, which creates an urgency and a focus to keep you driving forward. Because once you're invested, you've got to go make a return on that, right? So it gives you an inherent incentive to go be successful. The other, I think, positive bit of the franchising path is there are myriad franchise models, and they service almost innumerable industries and markets. There's a lot of ways to be successful if you think franchising is something that might be on your path.
So let's look at the lay of the land. And by the way, you guys can use the chat area. Bill can engage with you over the next few minutes while I'm speaking, and then we'll open it up to Q&A at the end. But in terms of context, right? I mean, making a major decision like going into business for yourself and certainly investing in a franchise business, it's a big decision. It could be an all-in decision or it can be a semi-passive decision. So we'll talk about that. There are multiple paths. Some people keep their W-2 job while they're investing and getting a franchise business off the ground. Others are looking to pivot completely. Some have been recently laid off and they're looking for what's next. So there are multiple ways to get going. But it's still a big time decision. And we're in a world that, I mean, obviously we all see all the headlines. It's all over the news, social media. Layoffs are rampant. And you see a graphic on the side there. A lot of it's in government with what DOGE was doing, but technology's laying people off, retail's laying people off, services are laying people off, and it's up huge, over almost 1.1 million layoffs in 2025, a huge increase from 2024. We know that AI is coming for a lot of people's jobs. It's a big part of why there are so many layoffs, and it's rendering a lot of jobs that you may be interested in today obsolete. I was talking with a franchisor or late last year. I actually interviewed him just sort of about what they're doing with his business and so forth. And he said something interesting. He's like, we never hire somebody, not as a franchisee, but just on the corporate side of this business. He goes, we never hire somebody without first asking whether or not the job can be done by AI first, right? And so it's just a different way of thinking that employers are filtering employment decisions through, and that makes a lot of sense. And so it's rendering a lot of jobs obsolete while creating a lot of new ones. And so there's definitely some opportunity if you have a bent towards some of the new jobs that are being created. The corporate world could be a great landing spot for certain of you, depending on where your skill sets are. But I think a big thing that we're seeing now, right, and a lot of the risk of taking a traditional job and the environment that we're in now, especially with military as a background, is that the cultures just don't necessarily align, right? You see the graphic on the side. There's nothing on this menu but dog, and dogs are about to eat it. Like it's a dog eat dog world. It's not the I've got your back camaraderie type of an environment that a lot of you are used to in the military, where we have an aligned set of values. We're working together towards a common vision. The corporate culture, as a lot of you have experienced, is very much not that way. And so the risk is, yeah, you're gonna take a job, you're gonna be in the corporate world, grinding in a culture that you might not align with, working towards something that might not even exist from an AI standpoint, like the job just might not be there. And it's all leading toward a decreasing satisfaction level. So these statistics are from a recent Career Builder employment survey, and you see the declining job satisfaction simply are you satisfied and do you enjoy your job? And those numbers are down. And for veterans, for a variety of reasons, it's significantly lower than the general workforce in terms of the satisfaction level. And again, there are a lot of reasons for that. Just a few statistics from a variety of sources. Almost half of veterans struggle to feel included in the civilian workplace. Again, it's that conflicting culture. You're coming out of something that has been such a big part of who you are and who you were into an environment that's not always built for success for veterans. Nearly 6 out of 10 reporting being underemployed, meaning you're just not maximizing your skill sets. The things that you bring to the table aren't being used by the employers. And in fact, if you look at number 5, a lot of employers still just don't really understand how military leadership, the skills that you have developed, will translate into the corporate world. Dissatisfaction with pay, I think that's not unique to veterans, certainly. I have a lot of friends who aren't military in the civilian workforce, dissatisfied with their pay and benefits. It's just sort of the nature of the work today. And then there's a lot of burnout, right? You're grinding, and burnout is reported as being significantly higher. And the question I would bring us all back to, and it's really the question I think a lot of us are asking ourselves when we're making career decisions. Are we taking a job? Are we starting our own business? Is it franchising? But really the question is, what's the mission? And what does winning even look like? Is it just income? Is winning a paycheck? Is it a certain income level? Hey, if I can make 6 figures in my job, that's winning. I need to make $250,000 a year in my job, that's winning. Is it wealth creation? Is that's what's important to you? Which is very different than just a paycheck, but is it about wealth creation? Or is it deeper? Is winning making an impact? And are you able to do that in your corporate world? And that's where a lot of the fulfillment, the job fulfillment comes in. Is it time? For me, I referenced that earlier. To me, that I would trade money for more time because time's such a valuable asset. For me, as long as I'm meeting my family's needs, but I could be jumping on the trampoline with my daughter after school, to me, that's winning, right? And can I
Brett,
do
you
that?
mind if I jump in here?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, for many of you on the call, we know each other, but you've all heard me talk about that key question when I transitioned to the entrepreneurial world. The question my wife asked, do you want to make income or do you want to make an impact?
Yeah.
Right. So you've all heard that. And I know all of you on this call are or have experienced all that context that Brett just talked about and all the decision points he's talking about now, we'll talk about in the future.
And I think where we're leading with this, yeah, thank you for that, Bill. Legacy for me, legacy is a big part of it. What are we leaving for our kids? Is it lifestyle? That's the time element. And ultimately, is it alignment with your values? Is that what winning looks like? And I think what a lot of people are realizing, and what Bill, you just alluded to, is it is increasingly more difficult to find that externally, hoping you land in the right job. What if we can create it ourselves? And that's the entrepreneurial journey. What if we create the culture that we want? What if we make the impact we want through choosing a vehicle where we have that choice, where we have that ownership? And a couple of statistics worth considering, this certainly speaks to the income and the wealth creation piece, maybe a little bit of the legacy piece, but millionaires aren't generally made sitting in a cubicle getting a paycheck on the 15th and 31st. It's not to say it can't happen. Definitely, I have a lot of friends who have a lot of successful stock options and so forth. But most of the time, people who achieve that level of success are doing it as business owners. And the second piece, and this is really sort of the take-home piece, and this is the shift that has really happened since COVID and increasingly so in a world of layoffs, is that Americans, 83%, are now viewing owning a business as a viable alternative to traditional jobs. That's a huge, huge increase. So the question becomes not if we like the idea of business ownership, but how to get into ownership. And as Bill said, there are some forks in the road. If you have an idea, go on Shark Tank. Absolutely. Start your own business. Plenty of ways to do that. Build a website, create your idea. But might franchising be a viable option? And specifically, why are a lot of veterans turning to franchising? And it can be a valuable option for your next mission for a variety of reasons. You're tapping into a proven business model. You don't have to recreate the wheel, right? If, we're not going to talk about McDonald's here, but people tend to know McDonald's as a franchise. You don't have to go invent a burger. You just tap in and sell an existing burger. It exists, right? It's a proven business model. You get all sorts of training and support, first-class marketing, and I think ultimately it's that step-by-step, it's systems. You're tapping into systems that you're simply duplicating, replicating, which a lot of veterans are really good at because you've done that in the military, and now we're able to do it in a business context. You have the ongoing R&D, and you're in business for yourself, but not by yourself. I want you to hear, I recently interviewed the gentleman you see on your screen, Air Force, and he's a franchise owner in New York. He owns a lawn care franchise concept. And I put the question to him. I asked him, I said, what is it? Why are veterans such good franchise owners? It's a real short clip, but I want you to hear what he had to say.
The biggest thing for me that stands out is being able to follow a playbook, operations. In the military, it's very structured. It's simple. Do this, do that. A certain amount of time. So they give you the playbook and you follow it for all those years. And then same thing with franchising. It's a playbook. You follow it. You got to work hard, and it speaks to itself. And another thing is leadership. It's hard to find leadership and become a leader, in a regular civilian job, especially at a young age. But being able to interact with, people in the military from different nations really prepares you how to speak to people, work with people, and just figure things out. So
there's more to the interview. But that's it. It's the repeatable patterns, right? It's the ability to follow a playbook. But it's more than that as well, right? There's a great book, some of you may have read it, called Flawless Execution. This idea that it's not so much inspiration. It's not so much we need more strategy. It's about executing well on systems that work. Consistent results come from doing the right things the right way repeatedly. And that's where franchise systems come into play. Somebody else has already figured it out. You have the ability to steer it the direction you want. There's some freedom in franchise ownership. You're your own business owner. You're awarded a territory. You can run things the way that you want to run them with your unique flair, create the culture that you want in your own unique location. But you're duplicating and replicating systems that are proven, that work, that create the desired result over and over and over again. And that's the ability to lead from the front, right? A lot of veterans, that's what you have learned how to do. You create your own strong, cohesive culture. So you're not hoping to tap into somebody else's culture in the corporate world. You've seen what works. You go out and create that, and that's what Luke was talking about. He has a team, right? He has technicians. He's deploying people. He's leading men in his business. He's out doing some of the work himself, right? So it's the 90% perspiration that's leading to the success, but there is the ability to scale through leadership. Jocko, Extreme Ownership, another great book that I've read, Discipline Equals Freedom. That's a biblical principle, by the way. Proverbs talks about that. Discipline equals freedom. And if you're disciplined and repeat the actionable steps that lead to success, it leads to some of those winning things that we talked about earlier. Freedom, time, control, legacy. Those things flow after the discipline that franchise systems allow. All right, so the question is, this is the environment that we're operating in. It's why veterans tend to be such good franchise owners. The question, what are some of the paths? How does it actually work? How do you figure out where you would fit well? I get this question a lot. Wait, I thought franchising was just McDonald's and Subway. My wife, I'm always driving down the road with my wife saying, oh, that's a franchise. See that truck on the road? That's a franchise, right? There's literally thousands of franchise concepts across dozens of different industries. So the question is, what's fit? And specifically, what's a good fit for veterans? And the truth is there's not a one size fits all. Everybody on this call is a little bit different. We're going to talk about that Zoracle. Some of you have already completed it. I've seen some of the results already for some of you who have completed that business assessment. You all write a little bit differently, but there are some through lines. There are some themes. And one of those themes, this is what I mentioned, 4,000 franchise concepts across 37 plus industries. I have a picture of Chick-fil-A on the screen because years ago, I decided I wanted a Chick-fil-A franchise. Have you guys ever had that thought yourself? Anybody raise your hands as you're standing in line, maybe with your kids or whatever, and the line's out the door at lunchtime, and because it works, because everybody loves their chicken sandwiches. It seems like a great business. But when I dug into it myself years ago, I realized it just wasn't going to be a good fit for me. They're very strict in what they expect. They don't give you a lot of leeway and freedom to do other things. I was running another business at the time. They don't allow you to do that. No side hustles. Like, no, they want you to be married to Chick-fil-A. And there were just some other things about it that just weren't going to be a good fit for me personally. And so that's really the question you guys need to ask yourself in a role that I play is, what does fit look like? But as I mentioned, there are a few things that tend to be fairly universal when it comes to veterans. And the neighborly brands tend to be a really good landing spot for veterans. So I have no vested interest in Neighborly. I don't get kickbacks from Neighborly. This isn't a sales pitch for Neighborly at all. But I have just found when I've been working with veterans specifically, they tend to do really well in the Neighborly brand. So I wanted to sort of bring that to you first. Neighborly are some of the brands. It's the largest umbrella organization of home services franchise brands. Luke, that you just heard from, he runs a Lawn Pride business. So Lawn Pride's in the upper left. It's a Neighborly company. You may have seen their billboards up on as you're driving around town. If you haven't, you'll see them now. You may recognize some of these brands that you see on the screen. And Bill had shared the statistic earlier. I think he said 14% of franchise owners are veterans. At Neighborly Brands, it's almost 40%. They're just a very, very veteran-friendly organization with very high success rates. And so if we work together, if I introduce you to some brands, it may be worth looking at a few of the Neighborly brands. There's some other options I'll talk about in a minute, but I want to give you the sense of scale, right? So this is just drilling down into one of those brands. It's an HVAC concept in the home services industry, established in 1992, right? And so they tend to have a well-established, long track record, that playbook that Luke talked about that you're just tapping into, that you're just replicating. They have 206 franchisees around the country in this particular HVAC. I like the trades. The trades tend to be recession-proof, right? At the end of the day, if your air conditioning goes out in the middle of summer and it's 95 degrees and humid in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., you're calling somebody to get your AC fixed, right? Same thing in the winter when it gets really, really cold. So they tend to be recession-type proof businesses, AI-resistant businesses, right? Plumbing, think about that. A robot's not getting under your crawl space, doing your plumbing and things like that. So I like those types of businesses, high demand, long-term success types of businesses. And this is from their item 19, which is all franchises publish what's called an FDD, a franchise disclosure document. You guys will be given one for any of the brands that you're particularly doing due diligence on. I'll help you figure out how to read those. But the item 19 details some of their revenue, what their franchisees are doing on average. And this is taken from the recent FDD for this particular HVAC concept. And you see there's a lot of money in these businesses, right? Average revenues of almost over $1.6 million a year, right? So, and the realization is just, could you chuck in a truck? I call it chuck in a truck. Could you start your own HVAC business? Of course. Could you start your own plumbing company? Of course. Could you start your own painting franchise? Yes. Again, if you're entrepreneurial minded, go create it. Or tap into an existing thing. You pay a little bit of a royalty to tap into their systems to have scalability. You tend to be able to scale bigger and faster and work on the business, not as much in the business with a franchise, as opposed to if you're figuring out it yourself. And you're not only doing the work, but then you're doing the hiring and you're doing the books and you're doing the website and you're troubleshooting this and you're doing your own accounting and like all that stuff. You wear all those hats if you're doing it yourself. I just really like franchising because it takes a lot of that off your plate so you can really focus on working on your business. But it's not just home services. So again, you might be looking at that and saying, I've got no interest in HVAC or plumbing or painting. Fine. There's so many other things. I just pulled a few that I've seen veterans do really, really well in. Talked about the Air Force. I'm working with a Navy guy right now who is looking at an airplane detailing franchises. He flew flew planes for the Navy. He knows airplanes. He loves the industry. And there's a really interesting concept there doing airplane detailing that I can introduce you to. Security, cybersecurity, those do really well. I highlight senior care. I actually had lunch a few weeks ago with the owners of a senior care concept here in East Tennessee. And they said something that was really interesting to me that I'd never thought about, because you think about senior care, providing in-home care to seniors, and that's great. He said, but a lot of our clients are actually veterans, disabled veterans. We're able to go and provide in-home care for veterans, and the VA pays for it. So here you have a business where you're giving back to your own community, you're taking care of each other, you're not worrying about who's paying for it. It's recession proof, recession resistant. The care needs to be done. The government's paying for it. And so, there's lots of opportunities there. Hydraulic hoses, right? So if any of you guys have worked in the electrical or technical aspects of things in the military, translate some of those skills to a business in hydraulic hoses. I just got off a call an hour before this one with a franchisor who's got a new concept doing golf grips. And they're killing it, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year doing golf grips. It's veteran owned. They want to cater almost exclusively to veterans. He donates $1 of every grip that's sold to veteran causes. So the point is there's lots of different things. And I'm just planting some seeds, planting some ideas, right? Everybody here is a little bit different. Like I said, a lot of you will fit really well with some of the common themes we've talked about, but everything's a little bit unique. And that's really sort of where I come in. We'll talk about next steps here as we wrap this up, but I just wanted to point out a few final things that make it really appealing as an option for veterans, and that is that a lot of these franchisors really like what veterans bring to the table. You have skill sets and leadership that translate well to creating success, and so they like to incentivize veterans to become owners in their concepts, in their brands. And so a lot of times you're going to get a discount on the franchise fee. And then a lot of the vendors, right? So if you're going to be outfitting a truck, in the case of the lawn care business, for example, and you're going to have to buy some stuff, some inventory or some tools or whatever that is in terms of the startup cost, a lot of times the vendors are giving nice discounts to veterans as well. So those are some of the financial benefits that we can talk about. And even depending on how you would fund your investment, a lot of veterans will tap into SBA loans or other funding options. And a lot of times there are favorable terms specifically for veterans in those loans as well. So, we can talk to you about all of that, introduce you to funding partners to help figure out all of that. But in terms of sort of the next steps as we wrap this up, and then I'll kick it back to you, Bill, and we can open it up for Q&A. I do just want to remind you, you're not buying a business. You have to be awarded a franchise. Franchising, the franchisors are looking for a good partner, somebody that they can say, I want to align with you, Ebony, or you, Ron, or you, Sam, to be the franchise owner in Dallas, Texas, or Alexandria, Virginia, or wherever you are, you're being awarded a franchise there. They're vetting you just as much as you're vetting them. And so I do want you to understand is that as you engage in this process, it's sort of a dual vetting process. You want to make sure you feel good about hitching your wagon to their cart, so to speak, and they want to make sure that they can trust that you're a good fit for their franchise concept as well. And usually when a candidate is rejected, it's because it's just a poor fit. It's just not a good fit. And so that's a role that I play, is helping to say, are you a good fit for this particular brand? You might really like this, but I might know that you'd fit better here. And that's where we have some tools, some systems, right? And so if you want to engage in this process, really the next step is to kick off with an intro call. The way my process works, you don't pay me to work as a consultant, but I'm happy to do a free initial consult. And then if you decide you want to engage in the process, it's starting to gather some intel, asking you some questions. I'll have you take that Zoracle business assessment that several of you guys have already taken, because it helps me to understand your values, what stage of growth. Would you fit well with the Neighborly brands, or are you more entrepreneurial? Some of you guys have already taken the Zoracle, and actually I don't think you're going to fit very well with Neighborly, because you fit a lot better in some startup types of concepts. You're a little bit more entrepreneurial focused, for example. What type of work style? All of those types of questions. And then what I do is I come back with a handful of concepts. I filter through hundreds, if not thousands of different concepts and bring you 6 to 8 what I think would be good matches. I present them to you, and if you like them, then the next step is to introduce you to the franchisor. So like, even if you like Neighborly, I would say don't reach out to them directly. Allow me to make an introduction, because I can position you as a high quality candidate, somebody who's sort of a priority type of a candidate. Make sure you're picking the right brand within the Neighborly umbrella, for example. So I think it's still just worth an initial consult with me, even if you think you like the idea of something like that. And then you go through the due diligence process with them, and I consult every step of the way in terms of helping you read those FDDs. Do you need a funding partner? What about legal? All of those process steps until you're eventually awarded a franchise. I just help sort of navigate the process with you. So very simple process there. Again, respond to my email, scan the QR code if you want that initial consult. But hopefully we have sort of opened your eyes to the possibilities, some possibilities that you might not have even known existed, that you understand what a franchise is and isn't, some of what the path to being awarded a franchise would look like, a few of the industries and concepts that may be appealing for you. And again, if this intrigues you and is a path that is worth exploring, would love to be on that journey with you. Bill, I'll turn it back to you for any closing thoughts, and then we can open it up for Q&A.
Yeah, no, that's great. This is one of 3 typical paths that folks can go down. I actually have a couple questions. First one's administrative. Can you
Please.
stop sharing the screen so we can see everybody on the
Yep.
call? I do better with faces. Hello, everybody.
There you go.
There we go. Hi, Gary. Holy smokes. Great to see you guys. Hey, I got a first question for you to get things kicked off, and then we'll open it up to everybody else. What are the top 2, 3, 4 things that service members and veterans that are considering franchising ought to be asking themselves right off the top?
Why you want to do it? In business ownership, something's got to drive you. Just because it's a franchise, just because they have a playbook, just because there are systems, doesn't mean it's easy. Doesn't mean, you just start printing money right away. You're going to have to do the work. If you're going to be shifting out of something else, why? Is it more time with your family? Is it a desire for more impact? That'll drive the decision on which franchise you align with. So I always start with the why question when I'm talking with candidates, and that's a question that I think people should ask themselves first. The other thing too is how much time are you going to have to invest in a business? There are some concepts that allow for semi-passive ownership, right? So there's sort of a spectrum. There are people who go all in. You're a full owner operator. You're going to be working 40 plus hours a week in the beginning as you're getting the business off the ground. It's going to be a year or two. You can be profitable quickly. There are definitely concepts where you back your initial investment and you're profitable year 1. It doesn't have to take long to start making money in a business, but you're forming relationships in the community. You're building a business, right? And so how committed to that process are you? And do you like the idea of sinking your teeth into it and being a full owner operator? That's what Luke's doing, right? He started this business about 2.5, 3 years ago up in New York. He was the one in the truck doing a lot of the work in the beginning. Now he's got a team, he's got scale, he's made connections, he's growing it, he's working more on the business than in the business, but it's taken him time to build his business. Then there's sort of semi-passive ownership where you can hire technicians right out of the gate. You can keep your W-2, but do you have at least 20 hours a week to at least put in the business? Because it's still your name on the franchise agreement. The buck stops here, so to speak. It's still your business that you're being awarded. You need to be somewhat involved. You have at least 20 hours a week. And then there are there are definitely people who just like to invest in operators. So if you got some money to deploy and you just like the idea of investing in somebody who can build a business and you have a brand you particularly like, that's an option, but that's not generally what a lot of people are looking to do. So Bill, I'd say those are a few questions to ask yourself right out of the gate.
Okay, great. The very first one I think makes a lot of sense. For those of you that have dealt with and coached, I always tell you when you're starting this transition journey, you want to answer 3 questions. Who am I? What am I bringing to the party? And how do I define success?
Yeah.
Franchising may be a solution to that, but it may not also. So great stuff. So what questions might any of the participants have? Call them out or share them in the chat. I'll try and keep up with the chat.
How much does it cost to buy into a franchise?
Good question. You got the franchise fee, you got startup costs, And that's mostly it. And they also ask you to set aside working capital. So when I give a presentation of the brands, we'll go into the exact numbers. Part of it depends on whether or not you go with more of a service-based, home-based concept versus a brick and mortar. If you're going to buy a gym, I mean, you can open an Orange Theory, you can open a gym, you could open a restaurant. Those are going to usually be 400,000 or 500,000 plus, whereas on the other end of the spectrum, 100 to 200,000. If it's home based, a lot of times you're going to have a truck. You're going to have to wrap the truck. Sometimes even if it's home based, they ask you to lease an office for Google My Business purposes. Again, they know what works. They know what's going to drive eyeballs, customers, clients. So they're going to have expectations on advertising, all things that you would want to do anyway if you're going to be building a business. They just give you the playbook on how to do it. So you can be on the low six-figure range, but the golf grips concept, I literally just got off the guy. They've got like a $49,000 franchise fee. You buy some inventory, and if you already have a truck, you could be all in for less than $70,000. That might sound like a lot, but an SBA loan, you could pay that thing back in 6 months. So it runs the gambit. And that's part of the conversation we have. We come and say, hey, here's all the liquid capital I have. So the franchisors will also have some requirements. They'll say, we expect a minimum net worth of this, and it doesn't have to be high. We expect a liquid capital of this. That could include home equity. It can include 401k. It doesn't mean you have to have $50,000 sitting in a checking account, but they might have some expectations there. But it's not as much as a lot of people think. And those are conversations that we have as well. And if I know that we're fishing in a pond that's got to be on the lower end of the spectrum, we can definitely fish in that pond. Some of you might have a lot of assets to deploy. You want multiple territories, multiple storefronts, for example. We can totally do that. One of you said you got 5 Chick-fil-A's. That's awesome. You might want 5 restaurants all around town. You could totally do that as well. I don't have a lot of people generally interested in food services because the margins aren't generally all that high, but my job is to help you find what you're actually looking for. Good question.
Graham, that was a great question. And Brett, appreciate the answer. I think I've discovered a couple of more key things you ought to ask yourself if you're considering franchising based on that. One is you ought to think about what is the business and how does it make money?
Yes.
I mean, you ought to understand. Now, that may be a second order issue, but just because I'm interested in something doesn't mean I understand how to cause it to be profitable. Yeah. Certainly buying into a franchise, they have great models and this and that. But if I inherently understand how they make money at first, it makes it easier to be successful sooner, I would assume.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. How are you making your money? And part of, let me just sort of project in the future as well, right? So you're about to engage in a process that it's a lengthy process. It takes some time. You could be months away from opening the doors to your franchise, even if we get started today, because they'll walk you through the process. And one of the stages in the process is unit economics. So they'll drill down into here's exactly what the average cost of our service is. And so you can start to put together some pro formas. Here's how we make money in this business. You can do some projections, figure it out. You'll look at the item 19s. But I always tell my people the one of, if not the most important part of the process is what I call validation calls. You're going to need to talk and want to talk and will be asked to and expected to talk to other franchise owners in the system. And you can ask them very explicitly, how quick was it to profitability? How are you making your money? What are you paying your people? What are your profit margins? You're learning from other owners in the system. It's great that the franchisor is telling me this, but what's it really like when the boots are on the ground and you're talking to, I usually recommend my people talk to 5, 6, 7 other franchise owners in other states even to get a sense of what it's really like building and driving the business. And then could you see yourself doing that? So Bill, you're exactly right. How do you make money? And does it actually play out the way that they're telling you it plays out? That's an important part of the due diligence process.
The other important part I heard of this most recent bit of a discussion is the question to ask yourself is what's your risk tolerance?
That's right.
That's part of it. So all great stuff. Other questions?
I have a quick question. In my experience, that when you can kind of break down veterans and transitioning service members into a couple of different groups. You have those who are relatively young, coming out as uh, uh, enlisted or junior NCOs or junior officers. You have kind of that middle demographic that are more experienced, and I'm coming from an Army background, more experienced NCOs, staff sergeants, maybe junior sergeant first classes, and captains and junior majors. And then you have the third group where are more experienced, more senior, whether those are colonels, and master sergeants and sergeant majors on the enlisted side. And what I found is that middle group tends to do the best. They're the ones most sought after by employers. It's generally that younger demographic and the older demographic that struggle a little bit. When you look at franchising, do you see the similar challenges for that younger demographic who may not have as much experience, and for that older demographic who sometimes is viewed as being too old and not adaptive to change? Do those groups kind of struggle when you're looking at franchising?
Really good question. And Bill, certainly welcome your thoughts in general, but specific to franchising. I actually work with a lot of young kids right out of college or even in college who want to start a business and have success, but they sort of have a sponsor, so to speak. Usually they work with a family member who has a little bit of experience, they've been around the block, they've had some jobs and things like that, so they can help their kids get up to speed a little bit. But I do find that franchise systems, having the playbook, takes some of that guesswork out. I find that they struggle more when they're trying to start their own business, where the failure rate is higher, right? I mean, we've all heard the statistics that the failure rate of any startup business within 5 years is really, really high. It's a lot lower in franchising because they have the systems for success. I do find that middle spot is the sweet spot, like you were talking about. They have a lot of success. But I would disagree. I would push back a little bit on the older demographic. Increasingly, the older demographic that is coming up against ageism, right? That's a real thing. I had a conversation last week with a 62-year-old who is sort of being pushed out of his current job. He's not ready to retire. And he's like, I can't find anything else, right? They see my age on the application, or they meet me for a face-to-face. They kind of see how I look. And there's an inherent bias, not because they're too rigid in their ways or anything like that. They're just sort of older, but they can have a fresh start in franchising and have a lot of success. So I do find that the older demographic is having a lot of success in franchising.
Okay.
Yeah, let me follow up with that. Sam, it's a great question. And I've seen your background. I understand where you've been. So congratulations. Great stuff. While I do not have direct franchising experience, entrepreneurial, corporate, global, all that, but I've dealt with over 2,000 transitioning service members, predominantly in the E79, 04, 06 arena. And when I have had conversations regarding franchising, the interest there, similar to what Brett said, is we now have an adult in the room that's interested in business. They have individually, they may or may not have the interest or capability for a particular opportunity. They're used to leading people and managing things. Okay? And that can be a great success. The challenge that I wonder about, and Brett, I'll take your guidance or your insight on this, is particularly for the more seasoned service members, like you're referring to, Sam. They understand that you need to play inside, color inside the lines, but they also understand that operational necessities require decision making that might be outside the lines.
That's right.
So how constrained can a franchise agreement be? So let's say Sam wants to get into, XYZ franchise. He's got the capital, he buys in, he understands how to do it, he's been successful with the training, and he sees opportunity on the ground that's outside the playbook.
Yes.
How flexible are the franchisees to color outside the lines?
Yeah. Really, really good question and an important question. And then I'm going to have a question for you guys here in a second. You guys can chime in the chat area. In the Zoracle Business Assessment that some of you have taken, others of you may still take in the future, there's an element of that that rates you based on the stage of growth where they think you would fit well. And the stage of growth is a spectrum from an entrepreneurial type stage of growth all the way up to what are called empire brands. We don't need to get lost in the terminology, but here's the general idea. There are some franchises that have proven their concept, but they have only just recently started to franchise. So the golf grips one that I referenced earlier, I got off the phone with this guy. The founder has been doing it forever. He's got proven systems. He's got a model that works. He's got a proprietary way of swapping out these golf grips. He's got a trademark on these putter grips. So he has figured it out, and he's now ready to let you run the show in, fill in the city. He literally only has 2 franchisees in his system, 3 more coming on board, and a few interested. There is a lot of leeway in a concept like that. It would be considered an entrepreneurial type of a franchise concept. They have tailwinds of systems that you can tap into, but you have a ton of leeway because it's still really sort of a startup type of a franchise for you to run with it, make it your own, color outside the lines a little bit. On the other end of the spectrum are empire brands. They have 500 plus franchisees around the country. Think McDonald's, think, I don't know, lots of brands that you may have already heard of where there is no wiggle room. There's no coloring outside the lines. You can't put barbecue sauce on a Big Mac. You just can't do it. And you might not fit in that culture. So if the Zoracle report says you're going to fit well in an entrepreneurial culture, you might actually not do well in neighborly. The neighborly brands tend to be more of sort of the plug and play entrepreneurial side where there's not a lot of coloring outside the lines. Now, the beauty of that is if you just can tap in, duplicate the systems, you're going to create success. But as soon as you start to say, I can do it better, or I can do it differently, all of a sudden you might feel like you're butting up against a culture that you just don't fit in well with. We need to steer you over towards the golf grips. Does that make sense? So part of it is where on that spectrum are you going to fit? And my question for you is, what do you think, right? So there's failure rates and everything. There's failure rates as real estate agents or start your own business or lawyers or anything, right? In franchising, the success rate's really, really high. People who make it 10 years with their franchise concepts, really, really high. But some people don't succeed. Some people fail as in anything. What do you think the number one reason for failing in franchising is? Thoughts?
They discover that that this particular pathway is not right for them.
Right. So I think I mentioned the bad. So either the pathway itself or maybe a poor fit. Okay, that could be for sure. Yeah, you just made the wrong decision. You're either not cut out to be
like being an entrepreneur is not for them.
That's what, and that would be an important question. That would be an important question to ask yourself early on. I will say, yeah, you're right. So that's an interesting philosophical question. We could have that. Are entrepreneurs born or made? Could you be successful? Period. Or are you trying to fit a square peg in a round hole? Maybe you just weren't born to be an entrepreneur. Good point. Very good question. That certainly could lead to failure. What else? And I'd mentioned it, I think, in one of my slides, just poor fit. You go with a painting franchise and you would have done much better in senior care. And so let's make sure we, find a good fit for you. So that's something else. But there's something else. Anything else?
Well, I'd guess you're not coloring in the lines at all.
That's it. The number one reason is you're not following the system. You're not following their system. They have a system that works. They've figured it out. Now, don't go with, if you don't like their system, don't go with that brand. And it's not to say you can't color outside the lines at all. And some concepts you have more leeway to do that. I'm thinking about a senior care concept, and I love it. I steer a lot of people to it because it's not super rigid. It's, the difference is guardrails versus like like tracks, right? So are you a roller coaster where the wheels are literally locked into the track and you can't exit that? Or have they just given you some guardrails and you can sort of go? And you have to figure out which you like better, right? And I like the senior care concept because they give you some leeway. If you want to do it your way, you can do it your way. You can color outside the lines a little bit. Hey, I've got this idea. Is it okay if I do this? The answer is yes, in most cases. But others are going to be very rigid and they're going to keep you, but you still want to at least use their systems. I was talking with a franchisor in kind of kitchen remodeling, and he said, "Look, we bought the guy out. Like he signed a 10-year agreement. It just wasn't working. He was about a year into it, and we thought he was going to be great because he already had experience as a remodeler. He was a contractor. He knew cabinetry. He knew all this stuff, but he came in and just tried to do his own thing. He wasn't following our systems, and he just wasn't creating success. He really probably just should have started his own business. They know it works. They have systems that work. Follow the system. You'll create success." And so, it's a balancing act. Sam, in terms of, yes, you want to follow your systems, but yes, you're an entrepreneur. So franchising is sort of that middle ground. You're in business for yourself, but not by yourself. So follow their systems, but also make it your own. You can totally create your own culture, hire the people you want, create the corporate culture you want, so to speak, within your own franchise. It's your business, but follow their playbook.
So many of you on the call have heard me talk about, in the Business 101 program, the life cycle of a business. Ike, I know you've heard it several times. JB, I know you and I have talked about it. More to the left, those pure startups, that's where you get a little bit more flexibility. If there happens to be a franchise, it's more likely when they get the proof of concept phase that you're going to have some flexibility. When you get over to the mature side, he's saying, yeah, you're probably going to do what they say, and that's how that's going to work.
Yeah.
So, yeah, great. What else? We've got about 8 minutes left, according to my watch. What else? We want to make sure we're getting questions in that you all may have.
What would be an exit strategy in the event that things are failing and not going right, whether you're following the playbook or not?
Yeah, that's a really good question and an important point that's worth bringing up. You own your business. It's an asset. You can sell it. So people sell their franchises just like you could sell any business. So maybe you're exiting early, or maybe you just get to the end of your term contract, whatever franchise agreement you're signing, and you're just ready to go on to something different. It's an asset you can sell. So people buy existing businesses all the time.
Great. Thank you, Brett.
Yeah.
Folks, really corporal and above have had experience to greater and lesser degrees leading people, managing things, and achieving planned results, right?
Yeah.
Those three experiences from your military can be very valuable in the civilian world, and I think could be really applicable here in the franchising space. They're going to give you a model. They're going to give you the SOPs, right? They're going to have the tech manuals. They're going to give you all that stuff. And then it's up to you to take it in, lead the people, manage the processes, and then achieve those planned results. I think that's a mental nexus that can be real applicable in this or quite frankly, any path, but in the context of this discussion. Okay. Brett, thanks for reaching out. Thanks to you all for participating. If you want to get a hold of me, I'm all over LinkedIn. Bill@veterancareerjourney.org. Brett, how do they get a hold of you?
Brett at franchisesforfathers.com, or the QR code as well that I can bring up on the screen. Also, I'll be sending out the playback link as well, so you guys can click into the playback link, reply to my emails.
All right, my friends. One last shot. Any alibis? All right. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. Thank you.